gathered here in the mystery of the hour, gathered here in one strong body, gathered here in the struggle and the power. Spirit, draw near. Gathered here in the mystery of the hour, gathered here in one strong body, gathered here in the struggle and the power. Spirit, draw near. Gathered here in the mystery of the hour, gathered here in one strong body, gathered here in the struggle and the power. Spirit, draw near. Once more. Gathered here in the mystery of the hour, gathered here in one strong body, gathered here in the struggle and the power. Spirit, draw near.
Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Spokane, where our mission is to join together to create a nourishing, liberal, religious home and to champion justice, diversity, and environmental stewardship in our wider world. Or as we say each day, to create community, find meaning, and work for justice. This church is a very welcoming congregation, and we appreciate your unique experiences, backgrounds, beliefs, and lifestyles. And if you are one of our long-term members or have been here a short time, or if you're joining us today for the first time, or if you're streaming with us today, welcome to all. Now, we will have an opportunity to greet each other in a little bit. One of the things, I do have a question, though. Last week, this was a red mug. This is not a red mug. What is this? What color is this mug? Whatever the color of this mug is, since I don't have a consensus throughout the congregation, they're at the back table back there. And if you have questions about our church and our organization or what we do here, please stop back at the table. Betsy Lawrence will be back there after the service, and she'll talk to you about it. You can have a cup of coffee with whatever color mug this is. So right now I'd like to offer the time for you to greet each other, say hi to someone you have not met before, and just get to know each other. Yeah. And I'm going to do the same thing. Thank you. We'll have more time to greet one another and share our stories during social hour with whatever mug color this is later on. But right now I want to turn to our informal greeting and of one another and to formally begin our service by lighting our chalice. The symbol of Unitarian Universalism, the symbol of our unity and solidarity, of our openness and inclusion, of our community and individual uniqueness. May this small flame be of our offering of warmth to those who are cold and alone, and a light to those in darkness. May it be a flame that ignites justice in our world and a beacon of hope to those in need. And may it reflect at least a spark of truth wherever truth has been lost, and cast a healthy shadow of doubt where it has been found. Our opening reflection comes from Stephen Erickson. We humans do not understand compassion. In each moment of our lives, we betray it. We know its worth, yet in knowing, we then attach to it a value. We guard the giving of it, believing it must be earned. Compassion is priceless in the truest sense of the word, and it must be given freely and in abundance.
Please rise in body or spirit to sing the first in-service hymn of our morning. It is in your turquoise hymnal if you choose to use that, or it will be up on the screen. Number 1008, When Our Heart is in a Holy Place.
When our heart is in a holy place, when we trust the wisdom in each of us, every color, every creed and kind, and we see our faces in each other's eyes, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we trust the wisdom down deep inside, and we listen with a loving mind, and we hear our voices in each other's words, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we share the silence of sacred space, and the God of our heart stirs within, and we feel the power of each other's faith, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place.
I'd like to invite up all the young and young at heart. I'm by myself. I don't want to be by myself. Come on. Oh, thank you. Hello. How are you? Good. Oh, look, there. Hi. Hi, everybody. Hi, come on up. All right, so I'm going to tell a story today, and the story is called The Wall, A Timeless Tale, and it's by authors Giancarlo Mieri and Carolina Tenotti. Okay, there's some Italian authors. So, before I tell the story, I need a little bit of help from you. Can you name all of the colors that you can think of? Just shout it out, everybody. All right, it's a lot to work with. Nice job, everybody. Okay, now all of those colors that we just yelled out, I want you to do me a favor and imagine a world where a bunch of people live and they represent all of those colors that you just talked about. So can you picture it? A kingdom with people who are so many different colors. And that's the setting for our story today. So once upon a time, there was this kingdom with all of these people with all of these beautiful colors and skills and talents. And there was a king. Now the king was blue. And he was a very serious king. He had a very serious face. He was a blue king. And the blue king also had an advisor, and the advisor was also blue. So in this kingdom, the king didn't go outside all that often, but he decided he was going to take a trip outside. And when he went outside, he was shocked to see purple and ochre and ultraviolet and pink people. He didn't notice his own kingdom, and he said, where did all these different people come from? They don't look like me. And he wasn't very happy about that. So he told his advisor that he wanted all the people that weren't blue and that didn't look like him to be banished from the kingdom. And he said not only did he want them banished from the kingdom, but he didn't want to see them. So he wanted a big, gigantic wall built across the border so that he would never have to look at anybody who wasn't blue again. It reminds you of somebody. Me too. So his advisor was a pretty smart guy, but his advisor also didn't want to lose his job or maybe even his head. So his advisor just looked at him and said, "Sir, are you sure?" But the king was adamant. He would have none of it. And so a big wall was built, and everybody that wasn't blue had to leave. And they were very sad, of course, right, and upset. And they didn't want to leave their home, but they didn't know what would happen. So they all left. Now the king looked around his blue place, and he was pretty comfortable there now. And he was maybe even, some would say, happy that it was all blue. And so he looked up at the night sky and he saw all of these stars. And he didn't know what the stars were. And so he asked his advisor to bring him an astronomer. Well, his advisor said, "I'm sorry, sir, but all of our astronomers are gone. They've left the kingdom and they're on the other side of the wall." Oh, well, that made the king a little bit sad, but he was still okay, kind of happy in his blue world, even though he didn't know about the stars and had no way to find out about them. And that one of those talents and skills was lost, but that's okay. But the next day he was walking and he just noticed how everything was just kind of the same color, and maybe it was a little bit drab. And so he wanted to spruce things up, and he wanted to build a garden. And so he talked to his advisor and he said, "Advisor, I want to build some beautiful royal gardens." Well, the advisor had to sadly warn him, "I'm sorry, but we don't have the ability to build royal gardens anymore. The architects, the people to do the actual gardening are all gone. They're on the other side of the wall." And so the king started to get more and more agitated, and he was upset, but he still wasn't ready to admit that maybe life would be better if some of those people that he had sent away could come back. So the last day, he decides he's going to host a big celebration, and he wants singers and dancers and acrobats. Well, what does the advisor say? We don't have those. I'm sorry. They're on the other side of the wall. And the king gets furious and so mad, and he throws a tantrum, and he goes onto Twitter and talks about it. And then he says, who decided to build this stupid wall anyway? What a dumb idea. And then he tells his advisor to take it down. So, yay, we can. And so the advisor takes the wall down. He never contradicts the king because he is excited that the king has finally learned to see the value in other people, to see the skills and talent and the beauty that everybody that he sent away brought back into the kingdom. So we want to sing our kids out. Thanks very much.
Go now in peace. May the Spirit of love surround you everywhere, everywhere you may go.
We now gratefully give and receive this morning's offering, which sustains this community and its mission to the larger world. We will now kindle our candles of care. Each time we gather as a congregation, there are always those who are with us in our minds and hearts and who we want to wrap in our love and care. I want to kindle a candle for my wife this morning. Sorry. My wife, Lynn, is in the hospital recovering from emergency surgery last Friday, and so I want to kindle a candle of care for her this morning. Let us share a moment in silence, embracing others who are here and here in our hearts and minds this morning. You're welcome to say their names aloud as you are willing and able. those named aloud and those embraced in our silence, and all those who are suffering elsewhere in our world at this hour, we hold in our community of compassion. As we move into a time of meditation, find a comfortable position, put your feet on the floor, close your eyes if you wish. Take a deep breath in, breathe out, and reflect on these words from Amelia Earhart. A single act of kindness throws out roots in all directions, and the roots spring up and make new trees. How can you make a tree today? Our reading this morning comes from the February Journal of Unitarian Universalism, Touchstones. Compassion is the strength that arises out of seeing the true nature of suffering in the world. Compassion allows us to bear witness to that suffering, whether it is in ourselves or others, without fear. It allows us to name injustice without hesitation, and to act strongly with all the skill at our disposal. We need to make compassion a clear, luminous, and dynamic force in our polarized world. Rooted in determination to transcend selfishness, compassion can break down political, dogmatic, ideological, and religious boundaries. Born of our deep interdependence, compassion is essential to human relationships and to a fulfilled humanity. It is the path to enlightenment and indispensable to the creation of a just economy and a peaceful global community.
My Father's mansion has many rooms, with room for all of his children, as long as we do share his love, and see that all are free, and see that all are free to grow, and see that all are free to know, and free to open or to close the door of their own room. What is a room without a door that's sometimes locked or stands ajar? What is a room without a wall to keep out sight and sound from all? My Father's mansion has many rooms, with room for all of his children, as long as we do
and see that all are free. The choice is ours to share this earth and all its many joys abound, or to continue as we have and burn God's mansion down. My Father's mansion has many rooms, with room for all of his children, as long as we do share his love and see that all are free.
Thank you very much, Claire. That was very beautiful. Thank you. So I'm going to break a little bit from tradition today because I'm not going to stay up here on the podium while Dr. Rohrer is speaking. I'm going to go down there and watch her slides again. But I would like to introduce at this time Dr. Judy Rohrer. Judy grew up in Hawaii and earned her PhD in political science from the University of Hawaii, Manoa. I got it? Okay. Before and during her graduate studies, she worked for progressive nonprofits in Hawaii and the San Francisco Bay Area. She is currently the Director of Women's and Gender Studies at Eastern Washington University. Please welcome Dr. Judy Rohrer.
Good morning. Can everybody hear me okay? All right. So I am Dr. Judy Rohrer. Okay. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. So yes, I forgot that one. I use she, her pronouns. And I'm going to take a little bit of a different tack this morning. So rather than speaking as an academic and from my head, I'm going to be speaking more personally, and I hope that opens up space for your own reflection. So I've got a few access copies. Gordon's got a few, and there's one back there. If people want to follow along, there's a couple that are large print. So I just ask that you return them at the end of the service. Just bring them up here, because clearly I'm forgetting them. That would be great. I've also left a few resources on the far back table. The first are flyers for our Activists in Residence program this winter at Eastern. So this is a program that Dr. Sally Winkle, who is here today, and Lisa Logan gave life to. This is our 7th year. I'm new to Eastern, so I can't take credit for this, but these folks have made this happen. And our activist this year is Lily Navarrete, who some of you may know is a local immigrants' rights advocate here in Spokane. So there's a number of events that are happening. A couple have already happened, but there's still more to come. They happen on Wednesdays, and community members are really encouraged to participate. So pick up a flyer in the back. On the back is Lily's bio so that you can read more about who she is and help us spread the word. The other thing that is in the back, I'm trying to save trees, so it's a little small, but these little slips of paper that have the websites for a couple of immigrant rights organizations in Spokane and also a Washington organization, and then for Otro, which is the organization that I'm going to be talking about today. So those are in the back as well. I want to tell a story about recognition, misrecognition, identification, and disidentification. I want to tell a story about them that I'm increasingly realizing is a story about me, about us. I want to tell a story about experience, genealogy, memory. I want to tell a story about now that is also about yesterday and about tomorrow. I want to tell a story to help me consider how I recognize my ancestors, my kin, and how they recognize me. My story traverses 4 scenes. It begins and ends in La Frontera, in the Borderlands, Tijuana, Mexico. Scene 1, to the other side, al otro lado, Tijuana, July 2019. Gloria Anzaldúa wrote, "The U.S.-Mexico border es una herida abierta, where the third world grates against the first and bleeds." Anzaldúa, who left us too soon due to a complication of poor health care and diabetes, lived and died and helped us grapple with La Frontera, the borderlands. As she wrote and traveled across temporalities, she seemed to intuit the increasing friction, violence, and bleeding that was just on the horizon of the new millennium. In July 2019, in the midst of the Trump administration's attacks on all migrants, my partner, 80-year-old mother, and I went to Tijuana. We went to volunteer with Al Otro Lado, which translates to the other side. We went to witness what was happening and to offer whatever help we could to those struggling in the trenches, in the borderlands, en la herida abierta, the open wound. Al Otro Lado, or AOL, is a binational nonprofit providing legal services to indigent deportees, migrants, asylum seekers, and refugees. AOL's Border Rights Project in Tijuana is one of 3 AOL offices. The other 2 are in Los Angeles and San Diego. The main task of the Tijuana office was providing legal rights trainings and support to asylum seekers. During our week, just a week, volunteering, migrants' home countries included Honduras, El Salvador, Guatemala, Venezuela, Cuba, Cameroon, Turkey, Iraq, and Russia. Their journeys from those countries took weeks or months, depleting most, if not all, of their material resources and left them physically and emotionally scarred. And they were the lucky ones who made it. The bits of their stories we learned were horrible and soul-wrenching. Both the adults and children exhibited various levels of trauma, and still they were incredibly patient, hopeful, and resilient. I wondered what they knew of their possible tomorrows and how that lined up with what we know. AOL's main goal is to provide the most accurate information possible to empower and support migrants in making the best decisions they can about their lives. This is just one particular scene created by the larger context of arbitrary policies and intentional state-sanctioned cruelty. Just one example of the bleeding of una herida abierta in 2019. As our government does all it can to dehumanize these people, to insist that they don't belong, I wondered what they thought of us. In what ways did they recognize us? And how, through all of the disinformation and ignorance, did we recognize them? Scene 2, Chicana Falsa, Goleta, California, October 2004. I'm on a pre-doctoral fellowship at UC Santa Barbara. I'm trying to finish my dissertation about Howley, which is white people or whiteness in Hawaii. Having grown up as a haole in Hawaii in the 1970s and 80s, my dissertation is my latest attempt to interrogate myself and my responsibility to that history of colonization. So this is me, a blissfully unaware haole girl, at the natural slide on Kauai. Back to Goleta. I'm trying to explain the dissertation and my political investment in it when, in bewilderment, laced with frustration, one of my Chicana friends interrupts me to say, "Wow, you really do think you're white." This friend talks about eventually having a child. If the bio father is not Latinx, that child would be a quarter Mexican, assuming one subscribes to technologies of blood quantum. So that friend recognizes her possible child in me and is therefore even more invested in my disidentification with my Mexican ancestry. It would be more comfortable if I would stop claiming whiteness. Again, I'm reminded of Gloria Anzaldúa. To live in the borderlands means you are neither Hispana, India, Negra, Española, ni Gaspacha. Eres mestiza, mulata, half-breed, caught in the crossfire between camps while carrying all 5 races on your back, not knowing which side to turn to, run from. Since that conversation in 2004, I have often thought of myself not as mestiza, but as Chicana falsa, as inauthentic, the impure subject of belonging. To call myself Chicana or mestiza feels appropriative, and yet I have wondered about how, in growing up haole and developing my white anti-racist politics, I somehow came to deny my ancestry, my mother and grandmother in me. To whom, with whom, and where do I belong, not knowing which side to turn to, run from? The contradicted identification and disidentification is disorienting. Had I allowed one set of belongings to supersede others? Was this one form of living in the figurative borderlands? Scene 3, Estela Matutina Acevedo de Casnetzes, Nogales, Arizona, United States, Nogales, Sonora, Mexico, 1926 to 1937. My grandmother, Estela Acevedo, also identified as Matutina Acevedo and Estela Matutina Acevedo, was born at home in Eres, Sonora, Mexico, on May 31st, 1908. To Francisco S. Acevedo and Trinidad Galvez Acevedo. Estela went to school only through the 6th grade. Her father, Francisco, a farmer and storekeeper, died when she was 13. Sometime after Francisco's death, Estela, her sisters, 2 brothers, and Trinidad moved to Nogales, Sonora, Mexico. The first documentation I have of Estela crossing the Nogales border is from May 31st, 1926, when she was 18. The numerous documented crossings between 1926 and 1937 verify what we know from family history, that Estela was working as a waitress in Nogales, Arizona, and crossing the border daily, or nearly so, in order to support her ailing mother and her younger siblings. Interestingly, unlike the first crossing card, which listed her race as white, later crossing cards list which listed her race, as Mexican. Later crossing cards list her race as white. Was waitressing in Arizona a whitening phenomenon? was she trying to pass? How did the restaurant manager recognize her? White, Mexican, migrant, legal? Estella met my grandfather, George John Kasnetzis, when he began to cook for the restaurant where she worked. George was 17 years older than Estella and had immigrated to the United States as a young Greek man with very little education. He had earned his U.S. citizenship through military service in World War I, during which he was trained and served as a cook. It was now the Depression, and George was one of many migrant workers scratching out a living for himself and his young son, his first wife having died of tuberculosis. So as the story goes, they fell in love, and George proposed, but Estella turned him down because she was supporting her mother and siblings. George was so upset, he left his job and Nogales, only to come back several years later to propose again when he heard through the grapevine that Estella's mother, Trinidad, had passed away and her siblings had moved to Ciudad Obregón. Estella accepted this time and made the familiar journey across the border, but this time as an immigrant. The non-quota immigration visa number 51 from September 10, 1937, which is there, lists her as Estela Matutina Acevedo de Kasnetzis, who is of Mexican ancestry. It also lists her race as Mexican. So when she crossed as an immigrant, the United States government recognized her as Mexican. She and Grandpa George settled in Prescott, Arizona, where she taught herself English by listening to the radio and reading the newspaper. She went through the naturalization process and helped other immigrants become citizens. Estella and George had one child together, my mother, Georgia Estella Kasnetzis, for whom they wished all the best America could offer. They could not have imagined that 80 years after her birth, American policy would compel Georgia al otro lado in Tijuana. Still, I know they would recognize and be proud of her as she tried to provide some comfort and temporary safety to migrant children at AOL's makeshift childcare area. Nogales is now a militarized zone, a city with the unfortunate luck of transgressing una herida abierta. This border, which my grandmother walked back and forth across almost daily 90 years ago, is now demarcated by a huge wall, razor wire, dogs, motion sensors, floodlights, border patrol, vigilantes, and lots of guns. Surviving the literal borderlands is now much harder than when Estella crossed, and even when Anzaldúa was writing. I know some of my grandmother's relatives, my relatives, die or are captured each day trying to make the crossing for the same reason she originally did. Economic survival for la familia. I recognize them in the Mexican migrants who filed into AOL. As we reinforce borders between nation states, so too do we build walls between kin and within ourselves. My grandmother died suddenly of an aneurysm when I was only 7, shortly after my family moved to Hawaii. I never got the chance to talk with my grandmother about her life in Nogales, and she never made it across the Pacific to visit me on Kauai. What would she have thought about making that particular crossing? What would I have eagerly shown her of my new life so different from hers? How would I have understood her? My mother says I look like Grandma Estela. And yet, because of my cultural ambivalence, I sometimes have trouble recognizing her in myself. Scene 4, Eres mi otro yo, Friendship Park, Tijuana, U.S.-Mexico border, July 2019. At Friendship Park in Tijuana, people gather to picnic and play at the beach, listen to music, drink in the bars, eat from street vendors. It's loud, it's colorful, it's vibrant. It could be any Mexican beach park until you look al norte, where the imposing border wall runs into the Pacific for hundreds of yards. And technologies of surveillance are omnipresent. In Otro lado, there is no color and little life, save for U.S. Border Patrol agents who walk or drive along the fence, staking and restaking U.S. claims to territory, dominance, belonging. What stories do they tell about those they watch through the steel slats? Do they consider the stories the watched tell about them? What about those agents from immigrant families? What about those who are Latinx? Are they caught in the crossfire between camps? Is it the myth of meritocracy that sustains them? And in what ways has that myth seduced me? How do their ancestors recognize them? How do I recognize them as kin? Looking across at the Mexican federal police and then beyond at U.S. Border Patrol agents, I think about Estela's crossings and the evolving biopolitics of Borderlands, producing various subjectivities and citizenships. Besides the fluctuating racialization of Estela as Mexican or white, a phenomenon that reoccurs with my mother, government documents captured physical characteristics: height, weight, eye color, hair color, and mole left cheekbone, also pimpled. Language: read, write, speak Spanish, as well as occupation, waitress, housewife, and marital status. This is page 2 of that 1937 immigration visa, which apparently was also accompanied by a birth certificate, a good conduct certificate, and a medical certificate, although we only obtained the birth certificate. So at the very bottom, and you're going to have to take my word for this, it indicates, quote, "I have not been in prison or almshouse," and, quote, "I have not been in an institution or hospital." The good, bad immigrant bifurcation is not new. That visa and many of the crossing cards and the certificate of naturalization have photographs attached, and in each, Estela looks directly into the camera, unsmiling, but calm, even patient. Like Ansaldúa, she seemed to be looking far ahead, just beyond the horizon. Does she see me there? Am I recognizable to her? Does she see the migrants, kin we encountered in the crowded AOL space? People have gathered at Friendship Park for decades to visit with family and friends on the U.S. side. For many, because they cannot travel al otro lado, it has been the only way to actually see each other. Church services are even conducted here in spiritual refusal of separation and regardless of who is watching and recording. Those who gather recognize themselves in and through their dedication to their families and friends. Political art adorns the border fence with names, images, prayers. The little boy in the top photo reminds me of a Banksy image. The large upside-down flag with crosses representing, with crosses replacing stars is striking next to the stop sign image that says lies. When you look at those same slats the other way, as shown in the photograph with my mother, the hat on, each slat has the name of a Mexican-American veteran who has been deported. When we were there, a large installation read, Eres, Otro, yo. You are my other self. Here in La Frontera, I find Estela Matutina Acevedo, my mother, myself, Gloria Ansaldúa, asylum seekers at AOL, migrants living in the streets of Tijuana, unaccompanied minors separated from their families. This is a story of identification, of kinship and recognition. It doesn't have an ending, happy or otherwise. There will always be more scenes. It is not an easy story, but one that is messy and contradicted. A story that bleeds backwards and forwards because it lives that way despite all odds. A story that resists temporal and geographic separation as it insists, Eres, mi otro, yo. Muchas gracias. Mahalo. Thank you.
Please stand for our closing hymn, Embody Your Spirit. And it is in your gray hymnal number 298, Wake Now My Senses, or on the screen.
Wake now my senses and hear the earth call. Feel the deep power of being in all. Keep with the web of creation your vow. Giving, receiving as love shows us how. Wake now my reason, reach out to the dew. Join with each pilgrim who quests for the true. Honor the beauty and wisdom of time. Suffer thy limit and praise the sublime.
As we move back into our lives in the world today, I want to encourage each of you to take these questions home. Reflect on them a little each day, and we can work together to make this a better world. What frame of mind and heart do you need to be in to be compassionate? To be centered and live compassionately, what do you need to address within yourself? How might your compassionate actions help to heal another person? And how might they help to heal you? Amen. Blessed be. Salam alaikum and shalom.